Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Pointy Not Sharp. Today we're taking a look at something really cool. Here we've got an Israeli used M7 bayonet. Now, all of these, well, these ones in particular, were made by Imperial in the US. And the bayonets were made to fit the M16A1, the Ghalil, and later the M4 in Israeli service. Now, the bayonets themselves were made by the Imperial Knife Company, and we know when Imperial Knife Company made bayonets, but we don't know when they made the ones for Israel. So they had three manufacturing periods between 1973 and 74, another production in 76, and finally 80 to 84. So one of those three times was when the Israeli contract would have been produced. Now, we don't know how many were produced for Israel either. It's all up to speculation, but we'll jump into a little bit of history. So in the 1970s, we don't know exactly when. There's a lot of I don't knows in this video. I'm sorry about that right now. But Israel purchased 110,000 M16A1s direct from Colt, and they got another 97,214 M16A1s as foreign military sales from the US. So grand total of a fuckload of M16s, just over 200,000 of them. And from 1972 onwards, they were also producing the Ghalil. Now, both of those two rifles use this style of bayonet, and I dare say it was probably the either the foreign military sales or the direct from Colt that came with these bayonets just here, because Israel also had another M7 bayonet in service that was made by AES in West Germany, and I imagine those were likely sourced for the Ghalils, because I highly doubt they would source German bayonets to fit American-made rifles. I dare say the American-made rifles came with American CES. Now, in the mid-1990s, they also started getting more M4s, or rather that's when they started getting them, and they became widespread used in the early 2000s. So they probably just carried on the use of these bayonets with those M4s. And it wasn't until about 2010 to 2013 that the Tavor really sort of came into service and started replacing the older rifles. Generally, they still used the M4 a lot. And the Tavor doesn't have a bayonet lug, or generally doesn't, from what I've been able to establish. So these bayonets were likely phased out or sold as surplus, or sent to units still using M4s or M16s, which declining numbers. Now, from what I can tell, Israel never really used bayonets in combat. They saw the majority of their use in training, ceremonial duties, and more as like a utility tool, pretty much like most soldiers end up doing. So, you're using a pry bar, a hammer, open boxes, using it to eat open rations, things like that. I mean, that's 99% of what a bayonet is used for in modern day combat. I've seen footage from Ukraine of Ukrainian drone operators using bayonets while they're making FPV drones, using them to cut wires and open boxes and things like that. So, very rarely used. The construction is identical to a regular US M7 because that's exactly what it is. We have our M3 fighting knife style of blade with a full true edge, spear point, and partial false edge, flat back, spine running down the center of the blade. Got a nice big cross piece just here. I call it a cross piece because they're not really cross guards anymore. In my mind, a cross guard is something large with a hook quillen made to guard the hand of the user, or prevent another bayonet sliding down the bayonet during dueling. This is more just of a cross piece. I guess you'd call this a bit of a cross guard, but whatever. 22mm muzzle ring, which is NATO standard with their STANAG for 22mm muzzle devices, so that everyone could standardize on the same rifle grenades. We have our black plastic grips with our diamond checkering retained by two flathead screws. And down the bottom, we have our latch plate. The bottom part of the bayonet, you can pretty much call it the pommel, but in all the PAMs, this piece here is called a latch plate because it houses our two latches, and the tang is just pinned straight into the latch plate, and we just have two roll pins holding the latches in. Very, very simple. And two internal springs providing tension against the latches to keep them in place. Very simple construction. Pretty much all of these have gaps at the top and bottom of the grip, and I've been told that's to accommodate heat expansion, things like that, to prevent cracking and things like that. Now, these bayonets are designed to be a disposable piece so that when they break, they can just simply be replaced, and that's the easiest way that militaries have found to do it because they're very cheap bits of hardware. But most militaries will also buy spare parts, like spare scabbards and spare grips and screws and things like that. So they can repair them or replace missing or broken parts if required, but it was very rarely actually used. They just used US M8A1 scabbards. I've never seen one with an M10 scabbard, so it appears only the M8A1s, which is the earlier production of M7s. And this one here was made by TWB, which I think was the Pennsylvania Workers' Home from memory. I can't really remember. It's a later one with the steel tip. And of course we've got our little hole for a leg strap. This one's missing. And then we've got the canvas frog, the cotton frog, belt loop, hilt strap with a snap, hasn't been modified in any way. And we've got our M10 wire hanger. So completely stock US M7, nothing special about it. The only thing special about it are the markings. So I said these were made by Imperial, and that's evident by the fact they all have the Imperial stamp on the crosspiece just here. On the other side we have our model number, US M7, just up here. But where these become different and how we know they're Israeli is the fact that they have either this marking here stamped or laser engraved. This one's been laser engraved. Now, the earlier stamped ones are believed to undisputably be original. There's not too many of them floating around in the secondhand market, likely because they probably weren't surplused in large numbers, or at least not to the US. But there's quite a few getting around with these laser engraved numbers, and I say numbers, it's a Sadi, which is the 18th letter in the Hebrew alphabet. It's a government acceptance mark or government property mark. Now, the laser engraved ones pose a couple of questions because laser engraving is, while it was developed in the 1970s, wasn't really used until more recent time. And these bayonets were likely acquired by Israel earlier on in the 70s or 80s, when laser engraving was not as popular a practice. So it raises the question, were these in Israeli service and laser engraved at a later date, or have these been faked by someone today? The quality of the laser engraving is quite good. It's actually quite a deep engraving, so I don't know what to think. I paid a bit too much money for this one, considering that I don't really have any way to 100% establish the provenance, now that people have raised the doubts in my mind that the laser engraved ones might not be legit. But I'm going to hold on to hope and believe that these were originally purchased by Israel, sat in stocks for many, many years, and they were later laser engraved during refurbishment or something like that. Anyway, that's what we know about these. Really cool. I was super excited when I saw this one for sale, and I jumped on top of it and paid top dollar. And now I'm really hoping I haven't been got. If you have any more information about these guys or I've made any mistakes, please feel free to comment below. If you have any great sources for information on Israeli bayonets, please comment below. I'd love to hear from you. And something I feel I have to point out after a couple of my other Israeli videos, this is an apolitical page where we're talking about individual items from history. We're not talking about atrocities committed by one country or the politics of the country. I know Israel, particularly at the moment, is a very controversial topic, so please be respectful in the comments and please keep your politics to yourself. We're looking at individual items. I've examined items from Nazi Germany, Jewish items, I've examined Islamic items, I've examined from every corner of the world, and I've always kept the politics out. We're just looking at the item itself, sort of like from a construction, markings and collector's perspective, judging the item for itself, not where it came from. Thanks for watching.